Alright, so it's a rainy day out right now. There is a storm passing over California, so I'm not really able to go out and shoot some street photography. So in light of staying home, I still wanted to do something along the realms of street photography, and so I thought today I'd talk about something that I've never really shared on this channel before, and that is my street photography inspirations. Now, I started shooting street photography in 2016, and this craft is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've been shooting it now for years, and folks, I've just become completely obsessed with this art form. I mean, everything from the technical aspects of adjusting your camera, perfecting your camera, all the way to the compositions and, you know, the different things that make a photograph a story. And along the way of trying to develop and figure out what my style is, there were a few photographers that really inspired me, and I want to give my caps off to them today, talk each about what their work is to me, what it means to me, also show you guys a couple of their photographs, and hopefully you guys can see where I draw inspiration from for street photography. So how did I get into street photography? Well, in 2016, there was a documentary released about this photographer who took a ton of photographs on a TLR camera, a twin lens reflex. She stored all of her images and she never published them. Then later down the road, someone found all of her negatives, scanned them all, and she turned out to be one of the most amazing photographers of her time. And folks, if this story doesn't sound familiar, I am talking about Vivian Meyer. Now, Vivian Meyer was really my introduction into street photography. I was really inspired by watching that Netflix documentary, seeing how she was able to compose, capture those really classic moments. I believe she was based out in Chicago. Her images were so powerful yet candid. You know, a lot of the images that she made were not posed, and so that was something that was new to me, and being able to freeze time and tell a story through a frame was something that I have never heard of up until that point. So I remember after the documentary, I purchased the book, Vivian Meyer, Street Photographer, and I have it here in front of me. I'm going to show you guys a couple of the images here, and it is just fantastic, you guys. So Vivian Meyer really was my early introduction, and she really inspired me to shoot more black and white. Now, I didn't really take up 6x6 format. That just wasn't for me. I shot mostly 35mm, but for the first year of my photography, at least for street photography, she's the reason why I stuck to black and white. Now, a little bit after discovering Vivian Meyer, I found the photographer CartierBresson, which ended up being my next inspiration. And what I really loved about Bresson was the fact that he used a ton of geometry in his composition. Now, anytime I think of him, all I think of is the decisive moment. And during his career, he took a variety of different photographs, but one of the more notable ones is the bike composition in France. Now, when I first saw that image, it really struck me home because I started to really understand what he meant when he was talking about utilizing the world as his composition. So, you know, the leading line of the curb going from left to right, or excuse me, right to left. Then you have that staircase providing just additional leading lines, the direction of the biker, where he is in the frame, the fact that he shot the image with a slower shutter speed to, you know, give off a sense of movement. All of those super small details added up to make the grand image, which is one of the most famous street photographs today. Now, what Vivian Meyer taught me was she taught me what story was, how to tell a story by capturing people candidly. What Bresson taught me was composition, how to utilize the world to your advantage, how to compose in your frame. And even though most of Bresson's known work is black and white, he really taught me how to utilize light and shadow also to your advantage. And that leads me over into the next street photographer here that really inspired me, and that is Gary Winogrand. Now, out of the bunch today, I think Winogrand is probably the one that resonates with me the most, mostly because I found his style to be the most interesting. After studying Bresson's work for quite some time, Gary Winogrand provided a new perspective on composition because a lot of his, I guess you would say, his horizons were just not centered, or they weren't straight. And I'm not an expert with Gary Winogrand's work whatsoever, but just from what I've seen, there still is a nice rhythm going to his compositions. He wasn't just blindly shooting. You know, you might see a documentary of him pulling the camera to his face, kind of like, you know, jittering the camera around, but to me, he did a very good job of utilizing just composing the images through that 28mm lens that he shot with all the time, as well as capturing moments that were just gonna stand out. And that is really what I look for nowadays when I shoot street photography. I try to capture moments that will never happen again, you know, moments that almost seem surreal. Winogrand's images were the most powerful to me, and till this day, he is still probably my biggest inspiration when it comes to making street photographs. I absolutely adore his work, and I recommend you guys check him out as well. Now, after Gary Winogrand, the next photographer that I feel like inspires me a lot is Alex Webb. And Alex Webb is one of those guys who I feel like isn't really talked about. We all know the big names, Bresson, Winogrand, Joel Meyerowitz, all of those guys, you know, they're very famous names within street photography. But Alex Webb for me was what really sparked my interest for color photography. All three of the photographers that we just talked about, most of their work is known to be black and white work, whereas Alex Webb reintroduced my mindset to incorporating color into my work. So he has a book called The Suffering of Light, and this is one of my favorite photography books ever created. The work in there is just so amazing. I'm not sure what focal length Alex Webb used. I'm thinking it's a 35, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section down below. The way he was able to incorporate color as well as composing the images were absolutely insane. You know, he would take a scene and tell a story, but it almost seemed like he was able to curate what he wanted in that frame, whether it be timing or whether it just be pure, you know, luck. There were photographs that he made where there were so many different layers. You had foreground, you had somebody in the center, then you had somebody up top. All of these different compositional elements working together, and they all seem to click in place. And that is, you know, one of the main reasons why Alex Webb is an important photographer to me and a big inspiration in my work. He basically was able to organize chaos. And if you can do that in photography and create something magical like that, I personally think it's one of the best skills you can have as a street photographer. So Alex Webb, you know, not only introducing color back into my work, he's the reason why I try my best to organize chaos on the streets of San Francisco. And the last photographer that I think really inspired me as of lately is one that is still around today, and it is Joe Greer. Now, Joe Greer, you know, he's a contemporary photographer. Now, I follow Joe on Instagram, and the first time I ever heard of this guy was through a fellow photographer. He was like, have you ever seen Joe Greer's work? At that time, I think it was like 2018, 2019. I really didn't know the guy. He then came out with this body of work. Again, my timeline here might be off, of like photographs from India. And that was when I first really connected with his work. There was so many memories and details that he was able to capture. You know, it gave off that photojournalistic feel with a twist on street photography, a very unique eye for composition. And so for Joe, the things that I take away from him is the way he's able to utilize color in his scenes. It's just so vibrant. It feels so clear and real. It almost makes you feel like you're standing there with him taking the photograph when you're viewing it, even on a screen. He's one of those photographers that, you know, you just put anywhere in the world and he's going to create beautiful images. He just has that natural eye for photography. And that's something that I aspire to be. That's something I aspire, you know, to do. I want to be like Joe Greer, where I'm able to go anywhere in this world. Despite where I am, I could be in the most mundane, just random town and create something out of nothing. And that's sort of the inspiration that I get from him. Just seeing his images on my Instagram feed, it almost makes me click in my head and, you know, I want to get up and go. So huge props to Joe Greer. He's one of my main inspirations, my main contemporary street photographers that I personally look up to. Now, those were just some of my main inspirations. I'm sure there are many more other photographers out there that I didn't mention in this list, but those are the main ones that I tend to revisit and look over their work when I'm feeling a little bit uninspired. You know, inspiration with photography is great. And if you can, you know, learn a few things about their compositions or about how they utilize their camera or utilize the color within the frame, you could take that all in like a sponge and create your own certain style. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying, you know, I'm an expert or anything like that in street photography, because I'm very much still learning today. I'm an avid student of street photography. So if you guys have any other street photographers you think I should check out and recommend, definitely leave them in the comment section below, because good eyes will always create great photography. So that's gonna wrap it up for me in this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your photography inspirations down in the comment section below. And if you guys aren't following me already on Instagram and wanna see some of my own personal street photography work, check me out on Instagram here at King Japes. Yeah, shoot me a follow. But that's gonna wrap it up, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you in the next one. As always, Minolta Gang.